8th Street.
I didn't know if this was like a formal thing.
Y'all was something.
What up, my
else.
dog?
All right.
All right, brother. What's happening? How you doing?
Great to see you.
What up, baby?
It's
I know,
Slim
right?
JJ.
What's up, man?
Stop it,
Looking
man.
good.
Stop
My
it,
bad.
stop it.
Oh,
He done got skinny.
Step on the
Yeah, he got
whiteys.
skinny. He got skinny since the last time I saw him at work.
What's he? Oh, look.
Yeah, he's model-esque.
Oh, you getting sexy on him.
That's just not true. Traveling a lot, sleep schedule's been messed up.
Nah, I understand, man. It's
But
hard
it
to.
doesn't work that way for everybody because I went the opposite direction. I think I'm up 20 pounds since we started 2 years ago.
You know what? I don't work out anymore. I don't lift. So all the weight I've lost is just muscle. So I'm skinny fat.
Yeah,
You kind of lose it, then it comes back
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other way.
he built like a daddy. That's all it is.
Yeah, shit, we all are.
Yeah, he just built like a father.
Life.
Hold up, limitless. Niggas to me can't pinning it. I fought the here to witness it. Got my people feeling militant. Way I'm feeling, get me up. On the mission, get me up. Knowing me, I got the key. Only vision I can trust. Trust, limitless. Niggas to me can't pinning it. I fought the here to witness it. Got my people feeling militant. Way I'm feeling, get me up. On the mission, get me up.
Welcome to The Pivot. I feel like we've been trying to do this for over a year, so I appreciate you making some time. I know you're extremely busy. It's important time of the basketball season. Chan, Freddie T,
I know who
RC.
these guys are.
I know. I do this every show, man. Just
Really?
let me. You do a lot of shows. Let me do our show. Like, don't come in here.
I'm not sabotaging anything.
Bro.
Actually, somebody said to me, when you do your podcast, why don't you talk about yourself? Like, you never intro yourself, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, because
This is what you do every show?
every show I do the same exact. Well, not the same way, but
Might
very
steal
similar.
that.
I'm also not going to sit here and say "yep" the entire time you talk like LeBron does when you guys do your show. So, what? I'm just saying. Like, I like the way he sat
Gotta
down.
mind the game.
He sat down very, like he still got a little feeling about what happened in the Sweet 16 years ago. But I do have a question I want to start with. I grew up a huge Duke fan.
Yeah.
Fan of yours as well. You know, I joke about it a lot. But on March 28th, 1992, what were you doing?
I was watching
What were you watching?
Duke in Kentucky.
How did watching that game, what Christian Laettner did to win it, how did that influence the rest of JJ Redick's life?
I mean, I got into like sports in the fall of '91. I don't know if you remember those Atlanta Braves teams. So we didn't have cable. So like I could watch the playoffs basically. So the following year, NCAA tournament, Bulls Blazers was the first finals I remember watching. So it was like your introduction into sports is one of the greatest games of all time. Duke versus Kentucky. Laettner hits the iconic shot. And I was like almost 8 years old, and I just turned to my parents. I was like, I'm going to play at Duke someday. It was like, legitimately, I went from not a fan of anything, not even really into sports, to maniacal and obsessed with Duke basketball, like that.
So even during recruiting, when some of these other schools would reach out, was it even a thought in your mind, well, let me see what's going on here? You know, I'm in Roanoke, Virginia.
Yeah.
I'm a kid that has an opportunity. I'm an All-American. None of that mattered to you. It was still, from March 28th, 1992, I will be playing for Coach K and the Duke Blue Devils.
I think you have to offer yourself the opportunity to look at other places. But I wanted to, I didn't like getting recruited. I didn't like all the mail. I didn't like the phone calls. I didn't like going to AAU tournaments and having to, you know, pretend to, like I cared to talk to 15 different, like it was just, I was over it. And I just wanted to focus on my high school. So I told all the schools that were recruiting me, I said, I want to take unofficial visits and we'll pay for everything, but you have to treat me like I'm on my official visit.
Okay.
So we did NC State, then we went to UVA, then I went to Duke, and the next school was going to be Florida. And it was their Midnight Madness. David Lee was a year older than me. He had already committed. He was going to be down there. My parents weren't coming with me. My older sisters who were in college at the time, they were going to take me. So I was going to go down to Florida with David Lee and my sisters, no parents. And I never made the trip.
Can you imagine?
Tuesday night after the Duke visit, I called my high school coach. I talked to my parents. I called my high school coach. I said, I don't want to waste Billy's time. Like Saturday, I'm in the room. There was a room in the locker room like off to the side. It wasn't coach's official office, but it was like where he was in the locker room. And at the end of my visit, the last sort of hour, it was just me and him in that room. And when he said, you can commit whenever you want, and we'll hold your spot, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go home and think about this. And I got home and I was like, well, I don't need to fuck around with people's time. I'm not gonna waste Billy's time. You know, he's gotta make decisions. I think they ended up getting like Anthony Roberson and Matt Walsh. So, yeah, I almost played for Billy Donovan twice too.
Twice.
He signed with the Orlando Magic to coach.
Yeah.
And then, you know, backed out of the deal 2 days later.
Jay,
He could have been at Florida, man.
Bro, I was there with Peep, Matt Walsh, Corey Brewer,
Yeah.
Joe Kent. I was there all the time. We were around the same age. You missed a good time. Because
I know I did.
First time I ever hang with David Lee, because basketball, football, y'all kind of cross over.
Yeah.
He put me on 2 in the club. He said, hey, see, she with it. I said, appreciate you, David. And I went and capitalized. But something you said earlier, man, that I don't know if this is a Duke assumption or honestly a white assumption. You said you didn't have cable.
Yeah.
But was that a decision or was your family struggling? Like my whole thought is that you came from this from this palatial place and went to Duke when you read the story.
I would not describe us as well off. We have 5 kids, so I'm in the middle of 5. My dad was a potter when I was first born, eventually became a substance abuse counselor for adolescents, and then eventually became a counselor, but he was unemployed for like 18 months. My mom ended up going to work at the Gap and then a food co-op so that we just had a little bit of more money to like pay bills and stuff. And we were homeschooled. And then my mom ended up going back to school, became a certified nutritionist. Dad ended up having, I think he worked 20 years for Carillion, which is a big healthcare provider. He was like a counselor and a coach for their employees and anybody that was under their healthcare system. I never felt like we wanted anything or, my parents, they took care of us, but you had to make sacrifices, and cable television for a long time was one of those sacrifices.
We had cable.
We were broke. Priorities. Priorities, Chan.
Bro, there were times there's 2 things that stick out from my childhood, during this time period. First was when it was really tough, we bought everything at Sam's Club in bulk. And I'm a growing child, and my food was rationed. So I loved cereal as a kid, and whatever the serving size on the box, 1/3 of a cup, 1/2 of a cup, whatever that was what you were allotted for your cereal. And 5 of us, right? Now my kids, they get whatever the fuck they want. Just, can I have a second bowl? Yeah, you got it, fam, you got it. And then the second thing is there was this pair of Nike shoes. They were $85. I want to say they were the black and white ones. Charles Barkley wore them. This was I was in 6th or 7th grade. So it was 96, 97. I was obsessed. And all these kids got these shoes at my school, and they were the coolest shoes. And I was like, Mom, I'll do anything, blah, blah, blah. And she turned me down, you're not getting shoes. Up until that point, I had been wearing my older sister's hand-me-downs. So they started playing basketball. They would get done with their season. They say, here's our Converse basketball shoes, and I wear those to school. About a month later, my parents were like, Dad's gonna take you to the mall, and you can pick out a pair of shoes. And so we went to, I think it was Foot Action. Yeah, it was Foot Action. We went to Foot Action, and there was a pair of these forest green Adidas shoes that were $35. And Dad was like, you can get those. I was like, all right, cool. They were the worst shoes I've ever, they were ugly as fuck. But I was so proud and happy to wear those shoes on Monday. And now my fucking kids, dude, they've got, just Giannis's and Tatum's and Kyrie's and Jaws. I'm like, come on, man.
I think that
It's a different experience, man.
Obviously, look who their dad is. But no, just really stand there with your childhood, right? What memorable things sort of shaped who you are now as a man? Because you talked about the serving size on the cereal box. Yeah. Whoever looks at that, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's structure, that's discipline, I believe. That's wanting to make sure everybody else was good. And I believe that's who you are now as a person. We also got a little story from your time in LA from someone that we spoke to. And they were talking about a conditioning test. where I think that it was
I know
eight.
the story. I know the story. It was 6. So it was 6 sixes.
Correct.
Bigs had, I think, 33 or 34 seconds to finish. Guards had 31 seconds to finish. And Rich, our strength coach, and he told us, he was like, hey guys, week before training camp starts, everybody's got to pass this conditioning test. So it was essentially a 1-to-1 rest. So you run the 6, you get your 30 seconds, 34 seconds, whatever. Go again, right? I don't know if he intentionally miscounted it, but we ran 5. And I had been training for this for like a month, right? Been training all summer. I lived in Austin at the time in the off season, and I was like, "Now fuck this. We're running our 6th one. I'm not taking shortcuts." So everybody's, "Oh, fuck this motherfucker." So we'd have all get back on the line, running the 6th one together, bigs and smalls at the same time. But it was great. I mean, CP tells that story all the time because that's indicative of how I operated. But it was a necessity. Like I couldn't operate another way. If I took any shortcuts, I just didn't. I physically, athletically, relative to NBA players, I didn't have a margin for error. So I had to do everything I could to ensure that I was the most well-conditioned, the most prepared, whether that was film, recovery, all that stuff. Everything just became so important. And it became, honestly, like OCD obsession about the routine and everything.
Ain't nobody jump on you? Because if we're doing a conditioning test and they tell us you got 1 less, I would have grabbed you in the locker room, JJ. I'd have been like, what the hell are you doing?
No one did.
They ain't cuss you
No
out,
one
nothing?
did. No. It's interesting because I think about that time, so Vinny had gotten fired. They traded for Doc. They did a sign and trade with me. They re-signed Matt Barnes. Chris had just re-signed on a 5-year deal. So it was like that stage that we all get in where the only thing that matters at that point is like trying to win a championship. And so I think it was good for me because it was like a moment where I gained a little bit of respect more than, I wasn't trying to be like, legitimately was not trying to be like a do-gooder and kiss up to. I don't know Rich. I'm not trying to kiss up to Rich. I just know if you want to be about winning,
Can't cut corners.
you don't get 83.3%. I mean, you don't get 83.3% of the way there. You don't run 5 out of 6. What's the point of that?
The fact that you know that that's the percentile, 5 out of 6, I think that's amazing, right? And it sort of plays into a perception or stereotype. Duke, obviously it's a private university. You assume that the people that go there are intelligent. On top of that, it was a running joke in my household. I would watch the McDonald's All-American game, and every really good white boy, I would be like, that guy's gonna go to Duke. And there was a perception that came along with that. And so now, when you're in this position and you could just run 5, and it's nobody's fault, it's we've run our 5, we prepared, and then you say, okay, now I'm gonna say something about this, or this is the part of the way I operate. How did you balance what worked for you and the things that became routine against your perception, right? Feeling that people might think a certain thing of you or way about you by your actions or your words.
You guys know this. All of that evolves throughout your career. So the perception of you evolves, how you operate evolves, your level of confidence within the group. I wasn't a leader my rookie year in the NBA. I was trying to figure things out. Coming out of Duke and being like a 4-year guy and coach operating a certain way, Duke was like a little bubble. And so it was a little bit of a shock. And I don't mean white and black bubble. I mean just it's very insular. Like the university is a small school, you're on campus, you're in this ACC world. You think, and maybe it was true, I don't know, but you think that Duke basketball is the zenith of all sports. You do. You're this, and then you get to the NBA and you're like, oh, I'm just an irrelevant guy, that's wearing a suit to games. I'm getting DNPs without even putting a uniform on, right? So you have to like mature mentally through that. And it took till my second year, like halfway through my second year, for me to really like get it, you know. By the time I got to LA, that was my 8th year, I felt more confident in a group. I was confident in what I had done to that point in my career, and I was confident in the person that I was, and I was confident in the worker that I was. So you couldn't question me, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. After your second year in Orlando, you know, it was sort of the question, like you said, athletically, in that time in the league as well, because that was before Steph Curry changed the game. Athletically, you weren't one of the top athletes.
I wasn't strong enough. That was the biggest thing.
You know, and so you go to, I think Otis Smith is the GM at the time. You go to him and have a conversation in between your second and third year about your place on the team, whether or not you wanted to still be there. And subsequently, that ends up being the year where you sort of break through. What was that conversation like between you and Otis, and why did it eventually, as you were walking out, why did the decision remain that you were going to stay in Orlando?
Throughout that year, like Stan was great because you could have conversations with Stan, and he was transparent. You know, he was transparent. So we would meet throughout that year, you know, because when the season started, it was like you're in the rotation. I think I played like 7 minutes the first night, 6 minutes the next night, and then I was out of the rotation the third game. By the third game, I'm like, then after the third game, I had a horrible back spasm in practice. We were doing like this one-on-one closeout drill. It's funny, I got hurt so many times in practice with Stan on one-on-one closeout drill. I literally ripped 2 abdominal muscles in shoot around trying to close out on Jason Richardson.
He was working too damn hard, man.
Oh,
It's
my
practice.
God.
You heard what Iverson
So
said.
throughout that year, it was a conversation, and it wasn't like I want to be traded. I want to be traded. What happened was about February-ish, I realized, I was like, you know, we're really good, and we're going to win 50 games, and maybe I'm the problem. So I went to our strength coach, Joe Rogowski, and I said, hey, I gotta get stronger. I gotta change my body. So I laid the groundwork, and I knew I wasn't going to play a lot. I laid the groundwork for my entire offseason, the last 2.5 months of the regular season, and just really became maniacal about lifting. I know I was already like a well-conditioned guy, even more so with like Joe used to joke, he would, in the off seasons in Orlando, he would be like, all right guys, we're gonna meet on the track. This is in the summer in Florida. He's like, we're gonna meet on the track. We've got an 8 a.m. run. And anybody that was sticking around Orlando, and at the time, not everybody had like off-season homes in LA or Miami, you know. At the time, most guys were around. So you get 6 to 8 guys, you know, once or twice a week at 8 a.m. I would do the workout first, and then I'd just wait for everybody to get there, and then I'd do the workout with them again. Like, that's the type of shit I was on. So like that second year at the end, then I went to Duke all summer. Chris Carrawell, Will Stevens, the strength coach, Jeff Hauser, who actually roomed with John Carlos in the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico. He was a track guy, got my agility, speed, all that stuff better, worked with him all summer doing crazy shit. And I came back into camp and I was like, this is it. Like this, I got to prove myself this year. And it wasn't clean. I still had moments where you're out of the rotation. So the biggest thing for me was we get to the playoffs. Game 5 in the first round, Courtney Lee breaks his face. Dwight hits him with an errant elbow. He breaks his face. So and then Dwight also elbowed Dallenberg, so he got suspended. So me and Marcin Gortat started Game 6 in a closeout game on the road. And then I ended up starting all 7 games against the defending champion Boston Celtics and guarded Ray Allen, my childhood idol. Right. We win the series, and then I'm, 2 weeks later, I'm guarding Kobe Bryant in the NBA Finals. So like that, although it wasn't clean, it wasn't, like that's the thing people don't understand. It's never pretty. Like to get out of I was in the mud. I was in the mud. To get out of the mud, it's not pretty. It didn't happen overnight. I didn't say, I'm gonna make this change, and then the next season I averaged 20 points a game. No, it doesn't happen that way. Not in professional sports. It takes time. And so that third year, I had the same sort of ups and downs, but it was the breakthrough year because at the end of it, I said, I have confidence and I belong.
That motivation, man, for you to say you ran the whole conditioning and then they ran the conditioning again, was it to prove somebody wrong? Was it to be rich. Like they joke with me, I play football for the check. I'm like, hey, they paying people $70,000 a game. Oh, I need some of that money. And that's why that's why I knew every day on the way to the stadium how much money I was making. Why did you go overboard like that? Was it trying to prove that you belong? What was that purpose? Because it's something that makes you get up 2 hours before everybody else.
Initially, going back to the end of that second year and that summer at Duke, it was about survival, where I thought I was gonna be out of the league. So they had to pick up, options and stuff. So like you get to the start of your third year and they're picking up your fourth year option. So it was, am I gonna be a free agent and have zero resume? So I've gotta work my ass off. I've gotta have a great preseason in September, and they gotta pick my option up so then I can get to restricted free agency and not be out of the league. I had Bob Myers and I just had Bob Myers, my old agent, who's worked for the Golden State Warriors now with ESPN. I remember him having a conversation with me that year, being like, this team in Russia, they said they would be interested in you. Like that's where I was at in my career. It was survival. Now, for the rest of my career, I loved the process. I became fully invested in the process and I think part of it was I didn't get the result I wanted that third year. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, why don't I just love the work and not be tied to a result? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Total sense.
Now, your point about money, my 7th year, we fire Stan, Dwight gets traded. It's clearly rebuilding. I don't know if I'm part of the future. I'm a free agent. And we're losing. And it was the first time in my NBA career I was on a losing team. There were times early on in the season where I really was like, it was like a level of anger. Because I was like, I'm used to winning. I'm used to things a certain way. I did 5 years with Stan. Like, this is different. And Jacques Vaughn let me rock that year. Came to me in preseason and was like, you're going to be Armando Ginobili. You're going to come off the bench. I'm going to run the offense through you. I averaged like almost 5 assists that year in Orlando, right? 15 a game. So it was like, this is who I can be. This is a version of who I can be in the NBA. But there are times before games, hey man, it's time to get paid. That was my mindset. Let's go out there. Like, we might not win, but you got to go. There's different forms of winning. Mm-hmm. You have to recalibrate your brain a little bit.
You would think about that third cup of cereal.
JJ, you mentioned the Mamba, young JJ, Clay. Were you able to sleep before the series started? And how was that like?
So I didn't even know if I was going to play. So I started 8 straight playoff games. We go play LeBron in Cleveland. They had won, I think, 66 games that year, so they had the #1 seed. So we're in Cleveland, game 1, we come back, win at the end, I don't play. So I'd started 8 straight playoff games. I get a DNP game 1. Game 2, we're getting blown out in the first quarter. I played like 9 minutes in the second quarter, hit like 3 shots, whatever. Don't play the rest of the series. So going into that LA game, game 1, we're in LA. I'm like, am I even in I don't know. Am I playing? Am I not playing? We get blown out in game 1. So I go in, Kobe's still in the game. And I got a couple stops on him. In the NBA Finals.
He still looks excited about that.
It was a 25-point game. So I hit a 3, I got a couple stops. But I there was a battle, right? It was an effort thing. So then I got back in the rotation because of that. So like this is, and you guys, I don't know how much you guys lived through this in your career, but it is I didn't know till my 4th year, and then I didn't know again till my 15th year, or those first 3, and then my 15th year. I didn't know when I was getting in a game. I didn't know if I was going to even get to shoot the ball. Like, the role was totally different, right? And that's hard. Meanwhile, you're like, I'm 23, 24 years old, going through that. It's hard. It's hard.
That wasn't the first time you'd gone through something like that. You had early success at Duke. I think averaged 15 your first year, increased that by a little bit your second year, but you missed a big shot against UConn.
Yeah.
In the tourney. And that was also a turning point. I'm sorry. Got to bring up some of the...
That's not something you YouTube. I heard. I was talking about YouTube in your highlights, which I do. I see myself giving these guys a business, but go ahead, RC.
You got to do that when, like, NFL Network and none of those, like, networks can show you in the Super Bowl.
Look
So
at him.
for him, he has to
I
go
get
back. Yeah, he has to go back and look at some of those things because it's a lot of times I'm just walking by TVs and I'll see, you know, myself on the Super Bowl against the Cardinals in which we won. Then I'll see, you know, against Green Bay as well. Certain things that he can't do. Actually, you either. So now that I think about it.
But at least I got to the finals.
You did.
You came in today going, huh?
No, I mean,
Isn't it amazing, by the way?
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing?
You excited this morning.
Isn't it amazing?
That like
He played Kobe though. Which is my favorite.
guys who've won a ring, like they just think they're above everyone else.
Yes, they do.
You know what I mean?
They throw it out on you every time they can.
Like you had a big role. You had a big role.
Actually, probably Troy, who never would.
But he has a clip that's going viral now on IG where the guy who's doing the voiceover, he said RC made the guy doodle on himself. I think that's a claim
Like
to
on a
fame.
tackle.
Yeah. But no, I agree with you. It's my joke on this show because he was a drafted guy, college All-American. He was top 10. I'm an undrafted dude. And so listening to your sort of journey and story is more along the lines of mine. Like, even though you were, you know, one of the greatest college basketball players of all time, it talks about that, like, that doesn't always translate
Sure.
to who you are. But sometimes your experiences prepare you. You know, and I was talking about, you know, missing the shot against UConn, not as a joke, just because it's part of your journey. But when you've experienced a lot of success, you are a skilled and talented hooper at a school like Duke, and you don't get that result you want. Were there ever any doubts, or how many doubts did you have after that second season and not finishing the deal?
I think about not winning a championship at Duke, and I think about not winning an NBA championship on a daily basis. It bothers me. I'm lucky that I missed that shot. For me, for my journey, I'm lucky that I missed that shot because my commitment level was so low my first 2 years. And some of it was because it was harder. I had this idea of what playing at Duke looked like, and then you get out there and literally everyone hates you. Practices, team meetings, the academics, everything is harder than you could ever imagine. I got tested. We all did. It wasn't unique to me. We got tested every day at Duke. Mentally, physically, like our coaching staff, they tested us. They would fuck around with us like, hey, we're playing this team. They're gonna grab and hold JJ. Whoever is guarding me in practice, like, would literally just assault me, you know? And then the coaches would be over there talking shit to me while he's doing it, you know? So like, that was a practice, you know? There was one practice, coach says, hey, these 4 walk-ons are starting. I don't know who the 5th guy is. I'm gonna go up in the stands and watch the first hour of practice like I don't know anything about you guys. And then we just did war drills for an hour. Like, that was the type of environment we were in. So it was hard. Had that shot gone in, had I scored on that drive or had I tied, you know, I missed a 3 to tie it, had those shots gone in, we win a championship. I don't know that I would have ever changed. It took me to a lower place. It was a literal rock bottom. And I met with Coach May 20th, 2004 with Wojo and Collins. And it was like the moment that changed my life.
What was that meeting like?
They said, we're gonna get you the help you need. I started seeing a therapist once a week. That summer, I actually saw a therapist in Dr. Brody, who was at Duke forever. Saw him once a week, saw my therapist once a week. They put me on a schedule, the routine, the process. That's when I started to fall in love with it. I still have that sheet, you know, my wake up time, my check-in time, my class time, my on-court time, my conditioning time, my lift time, my study hall time, my dinner, my meals.
So they basically you mapped out your entire day.
I had to carry a jug of water at all times and my bedtime. And I stuck with it they said, you can't play USA basketball. I played USA basketball every summer, except that summer. They said, you can't play USA basketball this summer. We want you on campus. We were joking earlier. The day they picked me up, Wojo and Collins, I had lied to everybody. I had told my parents I had an incomplete in the history of New York class. I would have loved to have actually been engaged in that class. I live in this amazing city. I'm such an idiot. So I had an incomplete. I told my parents I was back on campus finishing my incomplete. I told Duke that I was back home. And really, I was just hanging out at a buddy's off-campus apartment, being a frat kid. So they find me. I was 225. When preseason finished, in September. We go to the ACC Media Day a day before practice starts, 2 days before practice starts. I was 192 and like 3% body fat. I got in insane shape, and none of that would have happened. And that carried me through the rest of my career. And none of that would have happened had that shotgun in. Coach Collins said something to me in that meeting. You know the shitty part? We'll never know how good you can be. If you have this level of commitment, we'll never know how good you can be. It was that, and then Coach in one of the meetings that I had with him in April, right after we had lost to UConn, we didn't win a championship because you weren't worthy to be a champion. Fuck, dude.
Wow.
Soul crushing, right? I got to make sure that those two motherfuckers can never say that about me again.
That's cool.
Having gone through those things, right, and which is, I think, amazing story. That did it make having your jersey retired as one of 13 guys in the history of Duke basketball? Did it make that night more fulfilling when you were able to look back on that journey? And here I am having my jersey retired.
It would have been fulfilling no matter what. Mm-hmm. I think when you get to that point, me and Sheldon were the first two guys. They had always retired jerseys the second to last home game, your senior year. And Coach came to us. We played, I believe it was actually Miami. We played Miami. It was the day I broke the Duke scoring record. He comes to me before the game and says, or the day before the game after practice, and says, hey, we're going to do things a little differently. You and Sheldon are going to get your jersey retired, but we're going to do it after the season. I said, that's fine. So I knew it was going to happen, and it happened my rookie year. We just had to figure out a date that it worked with, the Orlando Magic schedule. And it wasn't just those moments, right? It was thinking back to the Leitner shot. It was thinking back to 8th grade AAU. We go to Orlando, and we end up winning the consolation championship. So we went 2-1 in pool play, but we didn't qualify somehow for the whatever. So then we played 8 more games, go 8-0. I averaged legitimately 35 that whole tournament. We played a team from New Orleans actually in the consolation championship, and it was the best game of my life. And my mom came on the court afterwards and she said, you're gonna do it. And I said, do what? She said, you're gonna play at Duke. So you think about I got tested in high school. My JV, I played JV in 8th grade. Chris Morris, he was so difficult. Billy Hicks my high school coach, he never let me get away with anything. They were constantly mentally, physically testing me. So you think back to all of that stuff when all right, that's a chapter of my life, but there was more that went into it than just that sophomore year. I certainly had to go through that to get to the jersey retirement point. But I told Coach our first meeting when I was on campus, summer before my freshman year, I said, hey, he said, what do you want to do in your 4 years? I said, I want to win a national championship and I want to get my jersey retired. That's what I want to do.
Wow.
And so I got one of them.
Hey, listening to these stories, I am not gonna lie to you, JJ. Now I see why you come off as so angry. Do you know that? Do you understand? Time I see you on TV and different things, you're I don't know if it's serious or angry.
You thought I grew up in a palatial estate.
That's what I was like. I thought you were a prince. I'm like, why is this prince so damn mad at the world?
It's the structure. It's just who he is. It's the complete fabric.
But do you know, I'm not gonna lie, my assumption was, I was like, why is he always so angry and, stuck in this, this is the way it is and this is how it's supposed to go and this, but it seems like that was created in you.
You know what's interesting? So first of all, it's not anger, although there are some things that I get angry about. Mm-hmm. It is competitiveness. Once I figured out, specifically First Take, that it's a debate show, I'm going on there to win. Yeah. Stephen A knows that, Mad Dog knows that. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I have a great relationship with those guys. On the structure part, because it's interesting, I lived a very black and white life. It wasn't till 10 years ago that I learned to live in the gray. And some of that was having a kid. Mm-hmm. Some of that was playing in LA for 4 years was life-changing for me as well. It gave me a level of confidence that I didn't have from playing in Orlando in a small market. I started reading this guy, Richard Rohr. He talks about the non-dual mind versus the dual mind. And I learned to live in the gray. So it may come off as very black and white.
Yeah.
It's based out of logic and reason, but I love the gray. The gray is a happy place for me now. It doesn't have to be black and white. It doesn't have to be either or. I say to Stephen A all the time, both can be true. Both can be true.
Sometimes I be looking like JJ about to hit him in his mouth. I be worried about people sometimes when you talk to him, interview him, I be like, he might swing on you.
You got your sleeves pulled up, and so, you know, you got forearm tattoos and things now. You sort of had a good boy image at Duke, and, you know, I've talked about that before. But you and your grandmother shared a moment around the same time you were speaking.
You know, my grandmother just turned 99.
That's crazy. You want to talk a little bit about, you know, what you guys did on a road trip? I think it was in Raleigh.
Yeah. So my sisters, all five of us, we all played Division I. So my brother played at Marshall football. All three sisters played D1 basketball. So my sisters, after they graduated from Campbell, moved to Raleigh. So they were close by when I was at Duke. So after, you know, the sophomore year thing, I wanted to get a tattoo. And I always wanted to get a tattoo. Like, it's the AI influence. I remember Reggie Miller had some dumb tattoo right below his neck, and he kind of peeked out his jersey, and I was like, I want to get a tattoo there someday. You know what I mean? But I was still like, all right, first one. So I have this little tiny thing on my chest, right? But Grace, my grandmother, she got a butterfly, and I got that. So this was after sophomore. You're going through that end of the summer. I'm like, I just want to get something to sort of memorialize the process that I just went through. So I got this small little, I think it's Japanese. I think it's a Japanese word.
You think it's Japanese?
Well, when I was in Tokyo in 2017, they said it was correct. Like, it was the correct word that I wanted it to be. And then I was like, I knew I wanted to get a sleeve at some point. So it was actually just random happenstance. I was on vacation in 2015 in Cabo, and I ran into Adam Levine. And he's tatted, and I was like, who does your tattoo? He's like, well, I've gotten a bunch of guys, but the guy I'm using now is based out of Oakland. So I hit this guy up. He came down, I think 4 times throughout the season. I got a sleeve during the season, bro.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
A sleeve during the season. Like, who does that? Who does that? That was the stupidest idea.
One of them is Joshua
1:9. Yeah.
And it starts with, you know, be strong and of good courage.
Yeah.
And, you know, I read some things where your parents talked about your faith, but you also had to find that at different times. And like, I grew up in the church, and once I got away from my parents and were able to make my own decisions and started to enjoy the college life, some of those things that were stuck in me and foundational from being in church every Sunday with my parents, I lost those things. Mm-hmm. And I had to find those as an adult. How has your faith evolved throughout your adulthood, throughout your career, throughout being a parent, throughout, you know, getting married?
Yeah, I mean, we could have an hour conversation about this. I think your point is like valid. Like, if you grow up in the church, and particularly in guilt-based ministry.
Southern Baptist.
Yeah, guilt-based ministry, and then you go to college, and you're doing things that you've never done before. You're out on a Wednesday night, you know, getting drunk, like. You have this like overwhelming sense of guilt, and it can really beat you up. I would say my faith evolved in a way that was very nonlinear. I started going to this church my 3rd year in Orlando. Some things happened with the pastor. He ended up leaving the church. I had a relationship with him, ended up leaving the church, and then he killed himself a year later. And then I went to a couple different mega churches, and I just, over the last like 8 years, I'm just not a fan of the church. It doesn't mean I'm not a fan of religion. It doesn't mean I don't believe a certain thing. I think it's good to have founding principles and beliefs, but Richard Rohr, as a real adult, has probably had more influence on me than anything. And it's that duality that I'm talking about. You can still believe whatever you want to believe, but it's more about, for me at least, it's about recognizing the divinity in all living things, right? And respecting that and loving that versus a set of rules. A set of rules, I'm not a fan of that.
People who move away from certain religion, right? Because I believe being religious and being spiritual are different things. The religion is that strict set of rules. The religion is...
It's also, there's a level of tribalism.
Yes.
That I think, particularly over the last, let's call it 8 years, has really become more divisive than I think what if you believe in whatever religion you believe in.
Right.
It's like the antithesis. The divisiveness is the antithesis of what this is supposed to be.
Exactly.
And the tribalism has created that.
Right, and that's actually where I was headed. You know, you talk about that divisiveness. No sport was more at the forefront of the way politics associated with sports than basketball in 2020. Which at the time, before you guys go in the bubble, you spent time with Drew Holiday. And you talked about different things and trying to learn. I've recently, just in, preparing, also heard you speak about an AAU story of when you learned it was different to be white and black. How has your relationships in basketball, which is, at least in America, a majority African-American sport, how has that shaped the way you do see race here in this country?
Let me just say that I'm so fortunate that I found basketball or basketball found me, because what it has done, it has opened my eyes, it has exposed me to different things, different environments, different situations, and certainly different people. And like, we lived in the sticks, man. Like, I didn't have a neighbor. Think about this, I didn't have a neighbor till I was a rookie in the NBA in Orlando.
Dang.
We lived in the sticks. Every house we ever had was just in the sticks, right? I was homeschooled. We were in these little church groups, in these little tiny bubbles. I'm playing for Boo Williams going into my senior year. I did 3 summers with the 17 and unders. Going into my senior year, we go to Brazil for 2 weeks, right? I played in China 3 times. I played in Europe. I played in Mexico City. Like, basketball has exposed me to a ton of things. And playing AAU growing up, I started, Cave Spring. One of my high school friends sent me the picture of our team when we were 9 and under. It's like, is that 11 white guys? So like, I turned 10. My dad said, you're gonna go try out for the city AAU team, the Roanoke Jaguars. Delmar Irving and Keith Haynes were the coaches. And a few of us were white. Most of the guys were black. Played with those guys for 5 years, played with Boo Williams for 3 summers. There was usually one other token white guy on the team that didn't play a lot, and me. And it's interesting, by the time I got to Duke, by the time I got to the NBA, I didn't think about I'm white, they're black. Like, basketball, you're all equal if you can play. That's the beautiful thing about the sport. But I was always aware, and part of that was, particularly the Boo Williams thing. I think I told that story on Taylor Rook's podcast, but like, you're on the road with these guys for 4 to 6 weeks at a time. You're going to different countries. I'm listening to like the people in Brazil, some of them that are more pale-skinned, how they refer to my teammates, like the words they're using. Like, so you're constantly aware of these things, tribalism and the duality. And so when 2020 happens, there wasn't a choice, right? There wasn't a choice. It wasn't about how it would look if I took one side or the other. There wasn't a choice. It was the right thing to do. Dude, I was so proud to be a part of the NBA during that time. And was it divisive at a level? Yeah. But I'll stand by what we stood for. Going to the protests in New York City, like, I'll stand by that. I don't regret any of that. It was the right thing to do. And it will be the right thing to do at another time. There's not a choice to be made.
Has there ever been any pushback? Because you're very vocal on all that right and wrong stuff. Who tries to push back, or has there been any pushback
I'm
on
sure.
decisions you've made? No, personally, like,
Yeah.
has somebody tried to change your mind of, hey, don't speak on this? It might mess up the money. It might mess up endorsements. It might anything like that.
There's 2 components to that. No, in terms of like a higher up, There's certainly takes I've had where I've had a coach call me or, someone from the league be like, hey, just be careful on this, you know what I mean? Yeah. There's stuff like that. In terms of what we're talking about, I think there's two components. It's the online sort of chatter, right? Certainly a ton of pushback on that, right? There's always gonna be that. And then I will have people come up to me and say, I don't agree with what you said or what you did back then or this, and I just talk through it with them.
Yeah.
I talk through it with them. The transgender thing right now in sports is like a huge topic. Mm-hmm. And like, I operate out of a basic level of empathy. And that has created this hugely divisive issue. And we're talking about, at let's say, Division I sports, we're talking about a handful of people that it's affecting. What Don Staley said, I said this, there was a Vanity Fair thing that they wanted to get into my politics. I said the same thing that Don Staley said. Where are they gonna play? That's just empathy. They want to play. Have you guys had close people to you come out of the closet?
Yes.
You know how difficult that is? The choice to change your gender? Come on, man. Have some empathy. Have some empathy. And I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. And what fucking thing in life is perfect? Or we're going to come up with this, like the NCAA right now. Oh, we're just transfer portal, NIL, like, it's not perfect, but at least the players are getting paid now.
Yeah.
At least they're participating in this business that no longer was an amateur sport as of 30 years ago. Come on. It took 25 years to figure it out. And it's not perfect right now. It won't be perfect.
Yeah.
So all this stuff, it's like the race relation stuff. It's not ever going to be perfect. We live in a country of 380 fucking million people. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning. I'm fortunate, very fortunate, that I found basketball. I can't imagine if I'd stayed in that little bubble. And by the way, my parents, they're the most empathetic, like, allies you could ever have. They're wonderful human beings. That's the environment I grew up in. You love people, you treat them equally. That's the environment I grew up in. But some of the people I was around, hey, they thought differently. The area I grew up in, that was different. I went to County South. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Went to County South. Driving on 220 through Boone's Mill. There's stands with Confederate flags everywhere. 30 minutes from my house. So, like, I was always aware of this shit.
What shaped you more? You come from this empathetic household that teaches you to love everyone, right? To be accepting. You now seem to live by. Was there ever any point where some of those influences that you grew up around or that you were close to, seeing those Confederate flags, how did that play into your thought process? Was there ever any time you had those conversations or thought to yourself, okay, maybe that's right, or maybe I should do that? What was being involved in basketball so influential that it never mattered about those things?
You're saying, did I ever think of thinking a different way?
No, not thinking a different way. What was it like dealing with the opposing sides of everything? Because, right, as a black man, it's going to be very rare that people are going to try to get me to think differently about being black.
Sure.
Right, you'll get some of the, like you said, the online chatter, those things, but it's going to be very difficult for someone who is not a black person to come up to me and be like, you should think this way, right? Racism is not a thing. Discrimination is not a thing. Yeah. But when you are outspoken as you've been, or when you do grow up in the places that you've grown up in, people feel like you can be more of an ally to them until they know you than us. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying, were there ever any times you had those outside influences try to change a little bit of what you thought?
I think the easy answer is probably no. I can't think of any specific thing. Vision of life and your belief system is shaped by the people you're around and the experiences you have. So being around people that look differently than me and being comfortable with that.
You're glad you found basketball. I'm sure basketball is too, because they need someone that can speak as passionately as you do about all things, but certainly about the game that you love so much, which brings me to your podcast with LeBron, Mind the Game. Because I love the art of the game. When I retired, they asked me if I actually missed playing. Nope. because my last couple of years, I fell in love with the X's and O's more so than the competing part. And that's kind of driven me to, when I watch games now, that's how I do. So going into your podcast, you guys have found a couple of haters out there too. Bill Simmons just gave y'all the "you think you're better than me" award because you guys are teaching. You don't want to lose that art of the game. Why was it important, or why is it so important that you guys are really trying to get back to the X's and O's and not lose that?
There are parts of the show that are X's and O's and parts of the show that are conversational. I think the point of the show is to get away from the discourse. And there are certainly parts of conversations where the narrative bullshit might come up. I don't remember at any point in time promising that we were just going to do X's and O's. The show is about basketball and commentary on basketball. Like this past episode, we talked a ton about the state of women's basketball and the icons that have existed over the last 15 years. You have the one and done era in the men's game, and then you have literally a dozen or so icons in women's college basketball. Why do you think it's more popular now? You know, and Caitlin Clark, certainly a driver of that. Don Staley, certainly a driver of that. Angel Reese, Juju Watkins, like there's a bunch of drivers of that. As far as like the haters, I don't fucking care, dude. Care. Like who cares?
Right.
Like it's, first of all, I'm doing this show with LeBron.
Right.
Like whatever level of divisiveness I may have with people, like, and by the way, I may come across as condescending sometimes. I don't care about that either. I don't. I don't care what people's perception of me is. I know who I am. I fucking know who I am. I know how much I love the sport of basketball, right? I know how much I love the sport of basketball. So know that it actually, truthfully, it doesn't bother me. Everything, you know this, you guys know this. When you are in this world of content, the only thing that matters to me is, did I make good content?
Right.
Yep.
Don't worry about how many views you get. Don't worry about if something goes viral. I don't care about that. Is it good content? Can I go to sleep at night being like, did I make a good podcast?
Right.
That's all I care about.
It is the
Mother
conversation.
effing dog. Man, you don't know how many times I've been on Zooms on however many calls we had. It's like from the time we started this show, I said, I don't care about anything but the content.
Yep.
We've had business discussions, and I've been like, man, business is a great thing, and you need business. But every time we sit down, every time we have an opportunity, if we focus on the content as the priority, the rest of the things will flow around that. And I think it shows in everything you do.
Man, listen, I've watched you from afar for a long time, man. Now sitting down with you, you know the Spider-Man meme, the guys pointing at each other.
Yeah.
Has JJ ever met another JJ? Have you ever, because you are interesting dude. What you just coming from the sticks, going through, like you said, driving through Confederate flag towns, but still being, I want to say naive, but just open to the world, playing the way you did, going to the NBA. Like, have you ever met anybody through your playing time on teammates where you're like, damn, you're me?
I think everybody's wired a little differently. So you certainly see, like for instance, this whole thing I think is born out of curiosity. You said the word open, like open-minded, like it's all born out of curiosity. Why I started doing a podcast in 2016 was not to train for media. It was out of curiosity. I want to have conversations with people. I did a boys trip to Boston in like 2013 with two kids I grew up with. One was working in Boston, the other guy's a lawyer in Virginia. And we were like, let's go to Harvard. Never been on campus. So we went to Harvard, we grabbed a few chairs, sat on the quad, had like an hour and a half conversation. I remember leaving that quad and being like, man, I wish somebody had recorded that. Be fun if they recorded that. So that was like the genesis of the podcast, was like, I'm curious, right? The person that immediately jumps to mind to answer your question of someone that I'm like, we're wired very similar, is CP. And we, truthfully, we didn't like each other. You know,
I can see that.
He played at Wake, I played at Duke. I slapped him when we were in college. He was talking shit in front of their bench, and I put my hands on him. You know, there was There was a rivalry in some ways in college. You get to the NBA, he gets Rookie of the Year. It's his second year, my first year. I'm sitting on the bench in a suit. He comes over to me. He's like, hey, it's a little different than college, isn't it? You prick. I become his teammate, and he vouched for me. Like, they asked him, do you want to bring JJ in? Yes, absolutely. We were at Brandon Bass's wedding in Houston a month after I signed, and it was the first time I ever really spent time with him. I saw him walk by. I'm sitting before the ceremony. I'm sitting in like the hotel lobby, and I'm like, I texted him, did I just see you and Jada walk by? He's like, yeah. I was like, let's go to the bar and have a drink. So we went to the bar, 4 of us, started talking. That whole first year, we would go to their house and watch Scandal and drink wine, right? I start playing with him, and like, I'm talkative, he's talkative. Like, in the moment, you realize this dude's all about winning.
Yeah.
That's all he cares about, right? He's a sick dude, like, just like me. I describe people as like sickos, like totally obsessed, totally driven, totally motivated, self-motivated, loves the minutia, loves the details. Go play cards. Like, you're the same person playing cards as you are in the 4th quarter of a game. Like, CP was the one guy I was like, hey, dude, we're gonna be friends for life.
And I told CP when we had him on, that could be called abrasive. That could be called being an asshole.
But I didn't find that with him at all.
But because you're like him, so 2 assholes don't see asshole in each other.
You know what, though? I'm gonna say something. First of all, you're right. I always say this about players, teammates, guys I watch from afar. Like, I love if you've got a little shit to you. And I think at our level, you need a little shit. It's hard to survive without it. It's hard to survive without it.
Yeah.
Devin Booker, TJ McConnell, right? There's some shit to them, you know? I can go down the list of so many guys in the NBA, like Dylan Brooks, Pat Beverly, Marcus Smart. Come on, man. It's part of the survival. It's part of what makes Draymond, right? I love that about certain guys.
You have a little bit of that to you in TV. I love working with you. You know, like the one day I actually got to do basketball on air with you. Like, I knew I didn't know what you guys did. One, y'all allowed me to talk about it, which I thought was super dope. But I also just understood how intelligent you were in the way you maneuvered. I believe it was one time, I can't remember, there was something that happened that was off the court. And, you know, we were talking about it. I don't know if it was Minnesota, you know, it was another issue of cops and unarmed black men. And you were like, I wanted you to say that, but I knew I couldn't say it. So I set you up to say it. And I put you in position. And I just always remember that. And I was like, as you walked off from me, I admired that about you. The awareness and the understanding and the belief in something, but also to know, okay, that's not my place. Or it may not be taken a certain way. You have, and other people on your show, on your pod, have talked about chemistry issues during the Lob City time. And then when Doc Rivers starts out badly in Milwaukee, you crush your former coach. And then you come out and you're like, people don't want the X's and O's, it's crazy I say this. I mentioned that to you and you were like, I did it for a reason. Like a week later, it drops that you and LeBron have an X's and O's show. But when you do say something like you did about Doc, a former coach, someone you have a personal relationship with, how much do you go back and forth on whether or not that's the right thing to do in this position?
I mean, I've gone back and forth on it 3 times. I've gone back and forth on it for 3 years. Because him throwing the Bucks guys under the bus, like it's not like the first time that he's done that, right? So I think what was different, and I said this on my podcast afterwards, like I do regret the tone because it did come across personal. I don't regret what I said. My job on that show is to provide commentary on the NBA. And that is one of the biggest stories of the NBA season. And so I felt like what I said was the truth, and I'll stand by that. I do regret the tone. I can't remember the exact specifics of what you're talking about, but it goes back to like, I can't speak on the black experience in America like I'm white. I'm a white dude. I recognize that, and it was an opportunity where we had to talk about it, and it was like Ryan needs to talk about that. Like I'll follow up with what Ryan said.
Yeah.
But like he needs to be the one that starts off this discussion, right? I'm the white guy.
Do you find it ironic that your career high was on Martin Luther King Jr. Day? No, I'm just saying. Like, is that lost upon you?
He got a little
Is it lost upon you that you hit 40 on like one of the few days we have, JJ? We don't have a lot. It's a huge NBA day. Martin Luther King Jr. is all over the court. And now that I know you, I know you're not the whitest human I've ever seen. But at the time, you seem like the whitest human I've ever seen. And then you go for 40 on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I mean, like, how proud of you are that?
He pointed out.
Oh man, I know what you're doing here. I know what you're doing here.
Do you feel like it's an assault on our culture? Like, did you set out that day that way? Or you like, man, listen, like it's their day. I'm finna go drop 40.
Houston had beat us. The year before in the playoffs, they came back from 3-1 down. They beat us. They had beat us earlier in the year. It was like they had our number. Right. So like I knew it was Martin Luther King Day, okay? But we were playing a team that had our number. I was trying to get a win. All right. That's all that happened.
No, I just
They're always talking about reparations. 40 acres and a mule. Take these 40 points.
Take these 40 points.
I love it. Isn't there a rumor that he has a little Eminem to him or something? Yeah, mixtape JJ, right? Or some shit.
I heard you. We did hear you have an album that's unreleased.
Yeah, when we get in the drop.
You got are there any bars from the album that you like to drop now? Maybe something you and LeBron could do on the pod as you drink wine, or there has to be a bar. If you would think about your rap career that is yet undefined, tell me what bar you've written and laid on a track that you feel could really define. What would you be? Would you be like Ice JJ, Reese's Pieces? Right, it's Eminem, you could be Reese's Pieces. What would Jonathan Clay's rap name be?
Do you beep out the N word?
I just don't say the N word.
he said,
We're talking about MLK, man. Like, it's the vintage.
When he came in, because I was messing with him, because like, he said, I was like, man, it's kind of racist what you said to me. He had golf clubs, and he basically treated me like I wouldn't know what golf clubs were. It's the Masters, it's.
I had carrying my travel bag, and he goes, what are those? What is that? I'm like, it's golf clubs.
Yeah. But
it was very matter of fact. There was no subtweet there.
And so like I told him, and I was like, I was like, as black people, you only mess with white people like that, who there's no hint of that, right? You can't just do that with everybody. So that was sort of the conversation we had.
So we weren't allowed to be in fraternities at Duke. There was a group of guys. It was like Chris Duhon, Reggie Love, some other football players, one of our walk-ons that had a fraternity called PDF, Phi Drink of 40. And my freshman year, they asked me to be in it, and I was the only white guy in the fraternity. You do the initiation process, you get in, and there's like a clothing print store at the local mall in Durham. So we had all this gear made. We get hoodies and sweatsuits and hats and T-shirts, and everybody had a number and their name, like their nickname for the fraternity. So mine was just simply J Red. So that was like my rap name as well.
Oh.
Fraternity's activities basically was drinking beer, playing beer pong, and then freestyling and battle rapping. Like that was basically the activities of the fraternity.
So you ready?
JJ, the floor is yours.
I'm not comfortable sharing.
Greg Olson, who is also excellent on TV, has one of the more famous freestyles ever released. Third Leg Greg was what he
I remember listening to that.
Called himself
when
on.
it came out. Yeah, I remember listening
to that. If you want, you good?
I'm good. I'm good.
So like for you though, when you look at all the things that you've been able to do you also ever think about the fact that you and Adam Morrison were the face of college basketball together?
I don't think about it a lot. It comes up that senior year that we kind of battled for the scoring title. Never played each other.
Right.
We spent some time, I think it was Jordan Camp in Santa Barbara. We knew each other. We played Halo. I remember Halo. Yeah. Halo 2 online was like a big thing. We played Halo with each other a lot, but like, you know, I don't really think about that. You know what's funny? I think about what I didn't do more than what I did. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense.
You know, he's so mad.
He's actually gotten cooler since
You know what's funny? My first year of retirement, I got introduced to this, back in 2019, I got introduced, friend going through a bad sort of breakup with his fiance, mentioned that he was seeing this performance coach and therapist that lives on the West Coast, but occasionally comes to New York. So pre-COVID, 2019, I signed with New Orleans. I started talking to this guy, and like he was great. And from like a leadership perspective, like really helped me that first year in New Orleans. COVID happens, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, all of these things. Like he's kind of helping me just talk through things. I could not have retired had I not had him. Like I wanted to retire, but to actually say the words, I'm done, like it was him. He helped me, you know, transition in this next phase of my life. But I remember that first year I called him and I said, man, I'm angry and I don't know why, you know? I see that comment sometimes and there's some truth to I work through that. I'm a very flawed human being.
We all are.
But there's anger, like, and I have to work through the why of that exists sometimes. I operate out of logic and reason, and sometimes I get angry if someone's being illogical, you know? I think that comes across.
Yeah.
That's a flaw on my part.
And you talk about the transition, man, because I got to ask you. I don't like to count another man's pockets, but it's online. You touched 100 M's. Mm-hmm. Why the hell do you have podcasts? Why do you have networks? Why are you bringing podcasts under you? Why are you on TV? You hit 100. Go golfing. Go buy a golf course.
He does that too.
Go buy a golf course. Get an island. Shit.
That is my life goal, by the way. In like 10 years when my kids are in college, I'm gonna start looking at land in the next few years. But I want to develop a golf course somewhere in the South that can stay open year round, you know, and.
But what are you trying to prove? Like, what's your goal?
I'm not trying to prove anything. I think the big thing for me, I have to ask myself this: why are you so busy? It took us a year and a half to get this sit down scheduled. Seriously.
Yeah, real talk.
You know, and like we saw each other back in February, brought it up again. RC, I owe you one. We'll make it happen.
No doubt.
I'm constantly in the mode of saying no to as many things as possible. So you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard? Number one, I don't know any other way. And number two, I just love basketball. So this affords me the opportunity. Why am I coaching a 10-year-old travel team? Because I love basketball, right?
Yeah.
You know, the why for me is just, it's all, why am I doing this podcast with LeBron? Because it's about basketball, right? Calling games, like it's the closest I feel to the game. It's why I'm doing it. Like I don't want to travel. I just told my wife yesterday, we had this, I turned 40 this summer. We had this trip planned right after the season. I'm like, I don't want to go on that trip. I don't want to travel. You think I want to fucking go to LA twice a month? You think I want to go Boston, LA, Miami? Next week, I got Wednesday, West Coast, Friday, East Coast, Sunday, West Coast. I don't know where yet. Based on the play-in, based on seating, I don't know where. I don't want to travel. But I want to be close to the game. I love the game.
Being on the #1 team now, though, how does that feel? It's a fast ascension. You know, we brought up the Doc thing, but you know, now you're gonna be with Breen and Doris and get an opportunity to do the finals. Like they call me a-ho sometimes. You are very much like me when it comes to routine and work and passion and those sorts of things. You know, Fred mentioned it's not being about necessarily the success. You mentioned that, right? Falling in love with the process. But that process in this part of your life has brought on a ton of success, right? LeBron James is not sitting down and having the respect for every former player that he does you.
It's not lost on me.
Yeah,
That's not lost on me.
You know, you think about those sorts of things. You know, getting an opportunity to be on the #1 team at ESPN, which seemed very quick. You know, when you get those sorts of accomplishment for a man that loves the process, loves basketball, what do those things mean to you?
A lot of it is surreal, to be honest with you. When I retired and did my first year at ESPN, I was like begging them to let me call a game. And they gave me a couple games in March, regular season. Then they gave me a few playoff games. And then I re-signed with like a games package with no expectation that I would be calling the finals a year and a half later. Like that's not on the radar. That's certainly the goal. The fact I get to work with Mike, like I will get to work with Mike Breen, Doris Burke, Lisa Salters, Tim Corrigan, right? These are legends in broadcasting. It's not lost on me. Like I'm so grateful. It is 100% surreal, Ryan. It's the LeBron show. Like it's you guys. I mean, you guys know this. Like when it's going, and you just got to ride it.
Your love for the game, it brought this back up to mind. The influence on the game, and I know you guys probably seen this floating around the internet somewhere. Who's had the bigger influence on the game of basketball? Steph Curry, Michael Jordan, and you know what? Let me just add Kobe in there because you can't shoot a shot without saying Kobe,
Yeah.
you know, or sticking the tongue out trying to be Michael Jordan, or either just shooting from the parking lot.
Yeah.
Just Steph, like in your opinion.
I say this, and this is not to apologize to anyone that I may have offended over the last 2.5 years, but I think you can go through any era of basketball and find people that had a major influence. You know, I made a joke about the 1950s, and players did have second jobs, but Bob Cousy had an incredible influence on the game of basketball.
Right.
He brought a flair and a pizzazz that made the game entertaining, right? Magic and Larry in the 80s, Michael Jordan, Kobe, AI certainly had an influence, a huge influence. The one thing I'll say is like, with how the game is played, I think Steph, James, Dame, Luka right now, like they're having as big of an influence on how the game is actually played. But everybody growing up, I mean, if you grew up in the 90s and you were in high school when Lakers were winning their championships with Kobe and Shaq, you looked at MJ and Kobe as like, I want to be like them. Like, and for guys like Tatum or Booker who got to spend some time with Kobe and be around him, or you know, guys that played with Kobe, like all these guys, they've had a major influence. I don't think it's who's had a bigger or less. It's just like every single era has had a few guys that had an outsized impact on the culture around the game and the way the game is played.
You know, I think in order to save the game, that's all necessary, you know, in each era. But my question to you is, prime JJ, are you better in this era? You get beat up less.
I always found the game to be physical. Channing brought up the pocket watching over here, and people have asked me like, could you imagine if you know had come out of college 5 years later, 10 years later, how much? I don't care. Like, these guys are gonna make 3x what I made. Like, same role. Like, they'll make 3x. I don't care. Like, I'm not counting anybody else's money.
How would rich people say?
I would say there is something to Ray in Boston, Steph, Kyle Korver, like how those guys played and how I played, where there's so much value because we understand the overreaction to movement shooters now. And Reggie, Rip, they had an influence on me as well, watching film on them early in my career at Duke and all that stuff. So I didn't get to do any of that stuff really till my 7th year in the NBA.
Right.
You know, that's just not how we played. So I in some ways I'm like, it would have been nice, you know, maybe I'd have a few more threes on the all-time list. Maybe I'd have more than 12,000 points. I'd maybe be closer to 15,000 for my career, but that's it.
Yeah, I mean, Duke all-time leading scorer, you know, Jersey's retired, great teammate. In this job, though, you have to, because you're so closely removed, we have to talk about like certain players you may have played with. You had some criticism of Zion early on in his career. And I'm from New Orleans, I live in Baton Rouge. When you watch him now, right? And like there's a lot of connections. Both went to Duke,
Yeah.
played with the Pelicans. When you watch him now, and the fact that he's healthy, that he's playing well late, how have you seen him transition, and how can that help him move forward, not only in his career, but for this year in the playoffs?
I think this is the best he's ever played, gotten in better shape since like the in-season tournament in December. I know what you're talking about. It was the reference to him not texting CJ McConnell back. When
Yeah.
CJ got traded there and he goes to the All-Star break, and it's been like 2 weeks since the trade. And they asked him about, well, what are your conversations with Zion? And CJ's like, I haven't talked to Zion. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's not really how things operate. You know, it was interesting, that moment too. It was like the first time that I had criticized a player. It certainly wasn't the last and won't be the last. And it was like, it was actually like, I'm sure he was angry, and I recognize that, but it was like actually like hard. Like afterwards I was like, shit, man, I hadn't had to do that before, but I felt like it was my job. How can I still be truthful, but how can I present it better? You think about those things all the time.
So you will get an opportunity to call the finals. Who will be the two teams that JJ Redick is going to meetings with, talking about hopefully for an exhilarating seven games? I mean, right now you got Denver and Boston on both sides playing extremely well, but there are some other teams that could factor into that, especially in the West.
I'm fairly terrible at prognosticating.
I'm awful. So.
I think that's the beautiful
worst
thing
part.
about any sport, right? It's not played on paper. It's not played on a simulation on 2K. There's the human element. There's the tactical nature of sport, where an adjustment, a player seeing something, can have such a big impact on what the result is. But I think it's going to be Denver and Boston.
So you go with the number ones.
Who won the East last year?
Here's what
I'm gonna say the Dolphins, the Heat.
Who? The Heat.
Here's what I would say though, is like, because Boston in particular, like they get a lot of that. I hear that a lot. You know, look at what they did in the 22 finals, or look what they did last year, you know, against Miami. It's like, it's a different team, man. Joe is more experienced. KP, Drew, Derek White, you know, kind of finding who he is. Jalen and Jason, I think, have had the two best seasons of their career. Maybe not in counting stats, but in decision making, in defensive engagement. Jaylen Brown, I mean, I've got to vote on this next week for All-NBA defense. Like, he's in the short list of guys that I'm considering for one of those 10 spots. You know, like, they're a different team. So I don't buy the, well, look what happened last year.
Yeah.
They added Kristaps Porzingis and Drew.
Yeah.
Joe Mazzulla is a when I talk about a
Another
sicko,
year.
like a guy who's fully invested and obsessed with the game and is thoughtful and thinking about the game. He's got a year of experience under his belt now. He went through what a deep playoff run looks like as a head coach. Like, there's value in that.
Derek White found himself because he cut his hair. There's zero.
We always ask our guests, what's your biggest pivot? And it's basically that one moment you can look back on, and it's not stealing cables, because you ain't have no neighbors. I wanted to ask you, I'm like, damn, y'all ain't just borrow cable from the neighbor, but I see why. But no, it's that one moment that you can look back on and say, without this moment happening, there's no JJ Redick.
I would answer that question. It's a great question. I would answer that question with the caveat that I think life is a series of seminal moments and not just one, because life doesn't work in a straight line. And whether it was that meeting after my sophomore year or the realization my second year, the things we were talking earlier, you know, the Donald Sterling situation and the impact that had on the way I think about things, like life is like a collection of a bunch of different things. To answer the question, there's not a singular moment. I think it goes back to my parents, to be honest with you. So like my dad, the sacrifices he had to make for his family and kids, the amount of work just growing up and seeing this guy work, unemployed for 18 months. You know, he didn't collect checks. He figured out odd jobs to do so we could have food on the table and pay bills. Mom going back to, you know, she had never worked before. Mom going to work at the Gap so that we could get a discount and have clothes. Like, my mom in particular instilled a sense of confidence in me that I had to go through things certainly without her, but like from a young age, that confidence, that moment in Orlando when we beat New Orleans, you know, the New Orleans Eagles, I think they were called. And she comes up to me and says, "You're gonna do it." Like, I think that's my parents ultimately, and certainly my siblings as well, but my parents ultimately are the reason I am the way I am.
Love it.
When will Coach Redick finally appear? Like, when will we see you on the sidelines running an NBA team?
You have to be careful about how you answer this question. No, I've been very open about this. Like, I have a desire to coach in the NBA. Life is about timing. Life is about the right situation. So I can't say a when, and I can't say a definite it's going to happen. Ecosystem that I've built and worked for over the last 3 years, I take a lot of, I wouldn't say pride because I don't want to say it's prideful. I take a lot of joy in this, and I love doing it, and it's important to me. So it's like you constantly, you guys know this, like you work so hard for something. It's hard. It's the same thing with our careers. Like, you work so hard for it. Like, I don't want to give that up, you know? So I don't know when, I don't know if, but it's certainly a desire.
My man, appreciate you,
Yeah,
bro. It
thank
was
you,
worth
guys.
the wait, though, for sure,
All
man.
right,
Thank
thank
you
you,
so
guys.
much, brother. Thank you, man. That was
I
excellent.
have a lifetime membership to Redick Hills.
Exactly.
Hold up, limitless. Take a stomach, got a pin in it. I fought the head to witness it. Got my people feeling militant. Way I'm feeling got me up. On the mission got me up. Knowing me, I got the key. On the vision I can trust. Trust, limitless. Take a stomach, got a pin in it. I fought the head to witness it. Got my people feeling militant. Way I'm feeling got me up.